Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Throne of Steel episode number 202 based on novel. So let's start. Sami Gina's aim was to break into the Temple Federation in the shortest possible time. How could he miss such a good opportunity? Therefore, he was going to launch a deadly attack at the most vulnerable time of the Southeast Fortress. Success in one fell swoop. Out of the 500,000 soldiers, the most powerful 100,000 finally appeared on the battlefield to accomplish their success in one battle. The rest of the more than a dozen devil gods did not follow Sami Gina to fight, and at this moment, even those who did not belong to any race were full of resentment in their eyes. Of course, they could see Sami Gina's ambition and purpose, but there was nothing they could do. The overall strength of the Vicious Devils clan was so strong that it even surpassed the Moon Devils clan and the Star Devils clan. 100,000 devils, what a terrifying strength. The 4 devil gods, plus countless devil lords, commanders and great devils, had the unity of magic and force, physical strength and wisdom not inferior to that of human beings. What a horrifying sight it was when 100,000 vicious devils went out at the same time. Even if the other devil gods knew that Sami Gina was going to take all the credit for himself at this time, and to take away the maximum profit from breaking the Southeast Fortress, what could they do now? Could they fight against the undead devil god of the 5 pillars? They couldn't, and they wouldn't dare. Even though they were still gathering more than 300,000 troops, they were not united, especially those races that did not have devil pillars would not obey them. No devil god dared to take the lead. They could argue, but they dared not really resist his order. There was a brief peace on the battlefield in front of the Southeast Fortress, but the atmosphere throughout the battlefield became more depressing. A large number of devil troops retreated from the front, and as they retreated, they gradually dispersed to the left and right. This also made the heartstrings of the 6 professional strongmen in the Southeast Fortress who had just relaxed more tense instantly. An army of 100,000 vicious devils, who came overwhelmingly close to the Southeast Fortress, deliberately slowed down at the request of Sami Gina, the undead devil god, so that the great pressure was more deeply imprinted on the hearts of every soldier in the Southeast Fortress. At the head of the Southeast Fortress, no matter what kind of profession they were, some of them took part in the Holy War 5 years ago. But even during that Holy War, the devils had never been as mad as they were today. The account of loss they had day and night would not stop this wild attack. They were all the most powerful races and elites of the devils, and this was the first time they had seen such a situation. The Devils clan would not stop. Although the loss of the Southeast Fortress was not as great as that of the Devils clan, there was injury of 1,000 enemies and 800 self-damage, and for some reason, the original disappearance of the magic-guided cannon of the fortress did not emerge from the blast hole. Although the 6 professions had greatly enhanced their combat effectiveness, the enemy was way too strong. 500,000 elite devils. What a terrifying strength this was. At this time, the Southeast Fortress, most of the soldiers were already tired. Soldiers and knights were better because of their own large number. They could take turns to go to the city to rest and recuperate. However, the wizards never got to rest. Even if Xiao Yonghao let them, they refused. They insisted on fighting continuously on the top of the city tower, and that had made them tired to death, and their magic had long been exhausted. Even if there was a magic crystal supplement, their spirits were too overdrawn, and the eyes of almost every legal professional turned bloody. However, the war was not over, and Sami Gina, the undead devil god, had no intention to postpone the fight by any means. On the contrary, he had finally launched his own army of devils, 100,000 vicious devils, which was also the most powerful force in this army. At the head of the Southeast Fortress, many people's eyes had begun to become desperate. Although they were by no means inferior to each other in terms of quantity, everyone knew very well what kind of combat effectiveness the devils had, and once this demonic army attacked the city on a full scale, it was impossible for them to resist. Xiao Yonghao stared like an eagle at the approaching army of devils. He could feel the weakness, helplessness and despair of the soldiers in the Southeast Fortress, but in his heart, the sense of war was still strong. "Come on, Sami Gina, come on. I've waited long enough for you. Fellow seniors, get ready to begin," Xiao Yonghao said respectfully to the 3 wizards around him. "Xiao Qiao, you are very good, indeed worthy to be the lord of the warrior temple." The wizard suddenly praised Xiao Yonghao out of the blue, and then the 3 wizards quickly turned away and disappeared on top of the city in the blink of an eye. Tired knights and soldiers who fell to the ground got up and picked up their weapons, and the wizards also struggled to raise their wands. There was only a little of magic left that they could unleash, and only at the last critical moment they might be able to kill more enemies. The despair in everyone's eyes began to turn into determination. The Holy War was an endless war between the two races, and there was no room for conciliation. With the Devil's Clan on such a crazy offensive, everyone knew how the Devil's Clan would slaughter once the southeast fortress city was broken. In that case, they might as well die in battle. The battlefield was the best training place for any professional. Here, it was not only their practice, but also the nature of their minds. There was no doubt that with the coming of the Devil Army, every professional of the Six Temples had been sublimated in their hearts. If they were still alive after this war, there was no doubt that they would all become the true elites of the Six Temples. All legal professions rest in place. Xiao Yohao suddenly issued some inexplicable orders which surprised the wizards, summoners and priests on the head of the city tower. The enemy was almost at hand. But he let them rest? That's an order. Mankind will win. Xiao Yohao stressed, and at the same time, his eyes had been fixed on Sami Gina, the undead devil god in the distant sky. The vicious devil army on the ground accounted for 70% of all the devils, and 30% of the devils were all above level 6 that could fly in the air, but they did not fly high. In order to increase the pressure on the southeast fortress, they all flew within a range of 1 to 150 meters from the ground. The vicious Devil's Clan was a powerful race with the unity of magic and war. In terms of the overall strength of the race, they were only inferior to the anti-heavenly dragons. The 4 devil gods commanded their armies in 4 directions, with Sami Gina in the middle. There was disdain and intense killing intention on his face. Despite the twists and turns, the southeast fortress was more tenacious than expected, but none of this was important. Sami Gina was absolutely certain to break the southeast fortress in the next offensive round. At that time, the people of these 6 temples would only become stepping stones for him to move forward. The devil wouldn't kill ordinary humans, but they would show no mercy to the professionals of the 6 temples. This was the best opportunity to attack human beings. If they were not maimed, how could the devils continue to maintain an absolute advantage? The vicious devil army was getting closer and closer. 5 miles, 4 miles, 3 miles. At last, the vicious devil army was less than a mile away from the city tower. Sami Gina's terrifying appearance had been fully presented to all human beings. The air of death grey was released around his body, and the horrific smell of death turned into a huge devil avatar in the air, as if it was ready to take a bite of the southeast fortress. Although he was the only one to appear this time, as the 4th horrifying among the 72 pillar devil gods, the previous devil gods might not be as powerful as him. And Sami Gina was absolutely convinced that no human in the southeastern fortress could compete with him. Sami Gina. Just then, a delicate voice sounded in the air. The sound was sudden, but unusually clear, and the sound seemed to be coming from all directions. The strong sound made Sami Gina, the undead devil god, shook slightly, from which he could tell that someone terrible was coming. The next moment, Sami Gina seemed to see the most terrible thing. Unexpectedly he retreated and was thousands of meters away in an instant with a look of horror. What did he see? It was a pagoda that suddenly appeared in mid-air and fell from the sky. The pagoda was presented in white, which was full of majestic white. In the process of falling, it became bigger and bigger, and it shone under the white light. It landed right on top of Devil's Head statue in the air. Everyone knew that the Devil's Head statue was condensed from the power of Sami Gina, the undead devil god, but at this moment, the statue collapsed under the suppression of the pagoda that it couldn't even escape in front of the white light, and it instantly turned into wisps of grey smoke and disappeared in the white light, while the fiery white light became even more eye-catching. The advancing army of vicious devils seemed to be under some heavy pressure, and the devils in the sky fell to the ground one after another, and they all looked into the air in horror at the same time. And that pagoda, at this time had grown to more than 100 meters high. In the white light inside, faint colorful glow spread. A divine weapon, there was no doubt that this was a divine weapon. But even a divine weapon was not enough to make an army of 100,000 devils so afraid. What they were afraid of was the white light emitted from this divine weapon. That aura made the dark forces in every devil surged and trembled violently. Sami Gina, the undead devil god, had completely lost his previous calmness and certainty, and his eyes were full of fears. That was the pagoda. That was the pagoda. If someone were to ask Sami Gina who the person he was afraid most in his life was, he would certainly answer the god of devils, there was no doubt about it. But if someone were to ask him what he feared most in the world, his answer must be the pagoda that he once faced at Yulongguan, which was the Tower of Eternity of Longhauchen at that time. At that time, the Tower of Eternity almost completely swallowed up and destroyed Sami Gina's domain, the undead devil god, and it left him painful memories. After that, it took him 3 years to recover, and it took him 5 years to fully repair the damage. At this moment, the Tower of Eternity reappeared, and although the color of gold had turned to white, the fear in Sami Gina's heart was even stronger. Even after he suffered a big loss last time, he knew that there might be no problem if he did not use his domain, but he still looked ghostly in the face of the Tower of Eternity. At the top of the Tower of Eternity, a pretty figure stood proudly above the spire, dressed in a long black dress that made her stand out on the top of the white tower, and there was a shining blue and purple from the huge black sickle in her hand. Looking at Sami Gina, the undead devil god, the horrifying murderous moment bloomed, together with the white glow released from the huge pagoda, which unexpectedly stunned all the devils. The one that could control the Tower of Eternity and unleash the power of purification to frighten the devils was obviously the vice president of the Temple Federation, the deputy head of the Light Dawn Demon Hunter Group, the goddess of death, the reincarnation saint, Kia. No one noticed that when the devils fell to the ground one after another, Jiao Yonghao showed a glimmer of ecstasy in his eyes, waved his right hand down to the city, and a golden light flashed in the air. Without the appearance of Kia, Sami Gina would have noticed such an obvious golden light, but at this moment, Kia completely attracted all his attention. Not to mention the deep fear of the Tower of Eternity, the aura emitted from Kia also made him feel a strong threat. Level 9 of rank 5? Is that the aura of level 9 of rank 5? No way. Since when do human beings have a strong man of level 9 of rank 5? And it is such a young girl who controlled the Tower of Eternity that had left him with painful memories. In the Devil's Clan's understanding of human beings, it seemed that only Yang Haoyu, the Holy Knight of Starry Sky who was far away in the Night Temple and had not appeared on the battlefield for a long time, was at level 9 of rank 5. Of course, there was a strong rise of Long Haochen, it was also possible to reach that level. But why was there a girl at this level? Sami Gina suddenly had an indescribable feeling that the deployment of the God of Devils was foolproof in his view, and the two sides were irresistible to human beings. But in the battlefield of this southeast fortress, mankind had appeared one after another, and this time it was a level 9 strong girl that he didn't know of. It seemed that everything did not follow the track they had planned, and a lot of variables had appeared. And would this variable lead to the ultimate route? However, Sami Gina was, after all, one of the 5 pillars of the devil. Although his heart was very afraid of Kia, he soon returned to normal. His cold voice resounded throughout the audience. Vicious devils, attack! At the same time, Sami Gina burst out a strong grey glow all over his body, and then the grey glow was completely integrated into himself, making his whole body transparent, and the strong aura of death completely converged, and the pillar of death, which belonged to him in the distance, also beamed with an eye-catching grey luster. To describe the current state of Sami Gina in a human way, he was using the domain for me. Isn't that Tower of Eternity will absorb my domain? Well, I won't let my domain out of my body, and let's see how you can absorb it this time. Sami Gina's strength was beyond doubt. While the devil pillar lit up, his body soared rapidly in the air, and in a blink of an eye, he turned into a huge devil as tall as 300 meters high with his body of grey crystal color. His change immediately boosted the morale of the whole devil army, and the speed of the previous suppression broke out instantly, and 100,000 troops pounced on the southeast fortress at the same time. But it was at this time, when the devils above level 6 had not yet risen from the ground, suddenly, a strange aura spread all over the battlefield. To be exact, it was within 2,000 meters of the southeast fortress. At this time, an army of 100,000 devils had all stepped into this range. Under the influence of that strange aura, the speed at which all the devils had just risen suddenly slowed down a little bit, and the next moment, the earth suddenly lit up. This sudden change immediately attracted the attention of Sami Gina, the undead devil god, and an extremely ominous premonition appeared on his mind. This is bad. Sami Gina's terrifying and huge body hurried to the ground, and at the same time, with a stroke of his hands in the air, a huge grey spear appeared in his hands, and there was a colorful light shining on it. It was a divine weapon. But why did Kia come? It was in order not to give Sami Gina a chance to influence the whole layout plan of Long Haochen. As soon as Sami Gina's body fell, the pagoda, which he feared most, crashed at him at an astonishing speed. During the flight, all the purification light previously released by the Tower of Eternity converged, and a pure white lotus was added to the top of the tower where Kia had been standing on. On one side, there was a strong foreboding from the ground, and on the other, a terrifying attack that threatened Sami Gina's life. There was no doubt that as a devil god, he must put his life first. What was the safety of his people compared to his own life? Therefore, even if Sami Gina was not willing to, at this time he could only resist Kia's attack rather than taking the sudden light on the ground into account. The earth was boiling, it was the boiling of golden light. The golden patterns with a diameter of 100 meters began to appear quietly on the earth, and the golden light fog rose in the blink of an eye, covering the height of 100 meters from the ground to the air instantly. Each gold pattern was similar in appearance, 100 meters in diameter, with many complex runes on it. The magic hexagram was in the center, and those runes seemed to be alive at this time, floating upward with the rise of the golden fog. There were about 30 of such patterns, and there was a certain distance between each. However, when the 30 golden patterns lit up on the earth without warning at the same time, it gave the impression that the plain in front of the southeast fortress had turned golden. In the distance, the army of devils of all races who had just retreated were dumbfounded when they saw this scene. What kind of power was this? In the history of the war between the Devil's clan and mankind, such a spectacle had never appeared before. Mankind had never come up with such a means of war. But what on earth were those golden formations? Just when they were still shocked, the devils began to hear a lot of screams, and the golden fog, like a sticky liquid, already trapped most of the devils. Only some of the earliest and strongest devils had time to rush out of the light fog and rose into the sky. However, the vast majority of devils, especially those who could not fly, could only be shrouded in a mist of light. Boom! The first roar sounded in the center of all 30 golden phalanx, and when the roar sounded again, the golden phalanx at the core suddenly burst into fiery golden light, which was like the sun's light at the moment of outburst. The sound of terror buried the screams of all the devils. The scope of the light explosion expanded instantly, from a diameter of 100 meters to a range covering a diameter of 300 meters. Viewed from the sky, there seemed to be a big golden fireball on the ground, and the core of the fireball was even incandescent. This was clearly a forbidden spell-level magic. Even if it was not the forbidden spell, it was pretty much at the same level. With the first explosion, there was a second, 30 golden legal arrays which broke out one after another in a short period of 10 seconds. And in mid-air, the collision between Sami Gina and the Tower of Eternity had just ended. Unlike the golden bursts on the ground, white and grey collided with each other in the air. There was no particularly strong roar, but the whole sky was distorted at the moment of the collision between the Tower of Eternity and Sami Gina. Sami Gina's face was also distorted, and what he felt this time was not the terrifying soul-devouring power of the previous Tower of Eternity, but the purification power that had the frightening purifying power of all the aura of death. What was even more frightening was that when the huge volume of the Tower of Eternity hit him hard, the strange lotus flower at the top of the tower lit up, and pieces of white petals shot out and went straight to his body. A strong sense of crisis made Sami Gina desperately deified himself to the strongest degree. The whole person was like a grey gem that burst out the strongest light, the spear in his hand had colourful luster blooming, waving airtight. However, under this collision, Sami Gina's 1/3 of his 300-meter-high body directly collapsed, and the grey light converged, only 200 meters left, and he was directly hit back thousands of meters away from the battlefield in front of the southeast fortress. The grey emitted by the devil-deified version of Sami Gina's body was all absorbed by the Tower of Eternity, and Kia reappeared on the top of the tower again. Looking at Sami Gina, the momentum rose instead of falling, and firmly locked on the undead devil god. Long Houchen let Kia come to the southeast fortress due to his thoughtful consideration. In terms of strength alone, Kia's practice level had broken through level 9 of rank 5. She also had 2 divine weapons, the Sickle of Death, and the Tower of Eternity. Compared with the devil god of 5 pillars, she was at most close to Marbus under the premise of using the 12 sacred saints. After all, the devil pillars of the devil's clan's 5 pillars were at least close to the existence of the imperial weapon. Although Kia was strong, she was still weak in pure strength. However, there was a term in this world called counteraction. This was true in terms of strength, but it really was the opposite on the battlefield. If Kia had met the hell devil god Marbus instead, she might be caught in an uphill battle. However, when she appeared in front of Sami Gina, the undead devil god, it became a tragedy for Sami Gina. The powerful undead spells and abilities on which he became famous for, and even his Pillar of Death, would be suppressed completely in front of Kia, just like when Kia suppressed almost all the undead kings on her own in Haoyu's plane. In the face of the power of purification, all the aura of death was in vain. Long Houchen let Kia come to the southeast fortress in order to suppress the strongest spirits, but as for other devils, there was nothing to be afraid of. A terrifying golden ball of light burst on the ground, and the light element even formed a terrifying element storm. When all 30 legal arrays exploded, even the strong ones of Kia and Sami Gina dared not stay in their original position but quickly fled high into the air. 100,000 vicious devils could only be seen flying into the air. They seemed like a very small number, like flies. And a lot of the vicious devils were buried in that golden sea. Not to mention the Devil's Clan in the distance. Even the professionals of the 6 temples on the southeast fortress were equally stunned. Who would have thought there would be such a terrifying scene on the battlefield? In front of the southeast fortress, within 5 kilometers of length, it was all turned into a golden sea. And the fury of the golden light was enough to drive people crazy. Even if it was a super forbidden spell, it couldn't achieve such destructive power. Even if the god of devils was here, when all these arrays exploded, he had no chance of stopping it. This was... Ha ha ha. Chiu Yonghao, the master of the warrior temple, stood on the battlements, laughing almost hysterically. He had lived for more than 100 years, but never in his life had he been as happy as he was today. The Devil's Clan, an army of 100,000 vicious devils, was buried in front of the southeast fortress. What an important victory it was! In the whole southeast fortress, except for the wizards who set this deadly trap, he was the only one who knew that there was such a terrifying attack waiting for the Devil's Clan. That was why he remained calm all the time. This deadly trap was reserved for the vicious devils. Sami Gina was completely shocked, suspended in midair, looking at the boiling golden ocean below. His facial muscles became completely stiff. How is this possible? No way. He wanted to shout and question like crazy, but now he couldn't even make a sound. As the 4th pillar devil god of the Devil's Clan, the chief of the vicious Devil's Clan, his 100,000 troops with an overall strength of the 2nd most powerful in the entire Devil's Clan, unexpectedly was covered by the terror of the light system forbidden spell. Feeling the raging storm of the light element, he didn't hope for any stroke of luck. Even himself, at the heart of this elemental storm, might not be able to escape unscathed. Trap, this is the trap of despicable human beings. But how come they have such a trap? There were too many questions in Sami Gina's mind. At this moment, his brain even fell into a blank. It was totally unacceptable to accept the facts in front of him. He originally thought victory was in sight, but instantly fell to the bottom while watching his own people perish. The effect of this blow was too big for him. This time, all the vicious devils who were good at fighting were out, and only old and young women and children were left in the tribe. It could be said that this 100,000 vicious devil army was the main force of the Devil's Clan. And this force was Sami Gina's greatest reliance. Ah! Sami Gina, the undead devil god, roared up to the sky, and his grey body swelled madly in the midst of his crazy roar. This time, he went straight up to 500 meters away. His eyes had completely turned to blood red, and there were even cracks in his extremely swollen body, from which a strong aura of death leaked. In the face of such a heavy blow, Sami Gina, the undead devil god, approached madness. From the collision just now, of course, he could feel Kia's overall suppression on himself. At this time, he was desperate to directly launch the devil's disintegration method. He wanted revenge. He had to kill all human beings to be able to reconcile. He became crazy. He was completely crazy. The pillar of undead in the distance burst out with an unprecedented bright grey light, shining straight on Sami Gina, who was covered with grey armor. The pillar of undead in the distance actually disappeared the next moment, and the spear in Sami Gina's hand suddenly skyrocketed, with grey lines looming. He turned his devil pillar into a weapon of terror. Kia coldly looked at the change of Sami Gina, and her beautiful eyes became empty. She knew that she had to stop Sami Gina anyway, because no strong man in the southeast fortress could stop him in his present state. Sami Gina was already determined to retaliate. 12 different colors of light shoot out of the Tower of Eternity at full speed, forming a circle to protect Kia. It was the 12 sacred saints left to her by the Deathly Hallows, the scourge of the undead, Electrolux. Kia was really sure that she could control the undead scourge Sami Gina. Her practice level was not inferior to her opponent, coupled with the complete compatibility of the attribute and the strong deterrent of the Tower of Eternity towards Sami Gina. However, Sami Gina couldn't stand it. He tried desperately when he lost his mind. His state at this time was like Po who just met Long Houchen. The 12 sacred saints surrounded Kia in the center. 12 of them were divided into 2 circles, 6 warriors and 6 wizards, all with complete attributes of the 6 elements. 6 colors twinkled, and the 12 sacred saints formed a large and a small 2 6-colored 6-bowl star, archguard in the center of the mining. The dense six-colored light rose, and the huge force of the elements converged to Kia in the center, and when the six-colored light entered the hexagonal range of the second hexagonal star core, it turned into a pure force of chaos. The legal array was invented by Electrolux, the Deathly Hallows and the Scourge of the Undead. At the beginning, with his own strong strength and the full support of the 12 sacred saints, he was able to compete with all the strong human beings on almost the whole continent. Although the 12 sacred saints were weaker than the time when they followed Electrolux and did not reach the domain level, they were still 12 ninth level strong ones. Under their common arrangement, Kia's own aura immediately showed a geometric multiple growth. The intensity of that increase was even comparable to the devil's disintegration of Sami Gina. Standing at the top of the Tower of Eternity, the sickle of death was held high in Kia's hand, and the original black sickle gradually turned into a crystal clear white, and the rich purification power instantly turned into a huge purification glow and spread. It was the sign that Kia had released the domain of self-purification in an all-round way. While releasing the domain of purification, Kia did not meet the crazy Sami Gina but urged the Tower of Eternity to fall downwards. The domain of purification was also falling down toward the storm of the elements of light that was weakening from the strongest fluctuations. If Sami Gina had any sense at this time, he must have understood what Kia was doing. However, now he was in a state of madness, pointing the spear in his hand to the front. The huge body stepped out of the void, instantly reached the sky, swung under the spear, and slammed directly at Kia. At this time, Sami Gina was so strong that his blow tore a huge opening in the sky, and the horrifying heterogeneous storm was raging so wildly in the air that the storm pulled the light elements below and converged toward the top. However, this helped Kia instead. An army of 100,000 vicious devils was almost wiped out under the series of explosions of the terrifying elements of light, and tens of thousands of lives were destroyed. The lives of the Devil's clan were also lives. There would also be aura of death after their death. Light did not completely purify death, but Kia's domain of purification could, and the process of purifying death was equivalent to the increase of her own strength. It could be seen that the silky white purification power was filtered out and injected into the Tower of Eternity in the process of the upward surge of the light elements below. It was only through the second purification of the Tower of Eternity that it was introduced into Kia's body, plus the increase of the Dharma of the 12 sacred saints. Kia's momentum as a whole person had also been raised to an unprecedented height. The sickle of death was lifted up, and the divine light shone in Kia's eyes, and the next moment, a mournful white light lit up in the air which collided with the falling spear. Although the volume of the two sides was completely out of proportion, when they collided with each other, Sami Gina and Kia shook at the same time. Sami Gina's spear was forced to rise above, and Kia hummed, and a trace of blood spilled from the corners of her mouth, but she made it to defend Sami Gina's blow. Sami Gina burst out a shout. At this time, his domain of death, plus the power of deification and devil's disintegration method, was fully integrated into this body. Under the collision with Kia's 7 deaths just now, the magic of the undead was diffused again. If this kind of battle continued, he would never get the upper hand. However, now Sami Gina was so crazy that he turned his spear regardless of his own safety. The grey from his whole body condensed towards the spear, and all the runes on the spear lit up. The atmosphere of terror broke out in an all-round way, and the spear was turned into a devil pillar hundreds of meters long in the air and smashed directly at Kia. The power of the devil pillar was really terrifying. In the devil's clan 72 pillars of the devil god, not all could directly use their own devil pillar as a weapon. Only the 5 pillars devil gods could do it. Unprecedented pressure immediately fell on Kia. Even if she absorbed a lot of the aura of death from the outside with her power of purification, she couldn't help but change her expression. This was clearly Sami Gina's desperate attack. In a flash of body, Kia and the 12 sacred saints disappeared into the Tower of Eternity at the same time, and the Tower of Eternity whirled crazily. At the spire, lotus flowers bloomed out one after another, crashing into the pillar of undead in the air, while the Tower of Eternity fell rapidly and dodged below. The bombardment of each lotus flower on the devil pillar would cause a series of big explosions, but it still could not stop it from falling. Finally, the next moment the Tower of Eternity fell to the ground. The pillar of undead fell across the board, right on top of the Tower of Eternity. The violent roar shook all over the country, and the surrounding light element storm was dispelled by this terrifying energy fluctuation. There was a large number of vicious devils' wreckage on the ground. The ones who could leave the wreckage were the stronger vicious devils who were still alive. If its practice level was too low, it had long been annihilated by flying ashes. The Tower of Eternity was smashed by the Pillar of the Undead, which rigidly sank 4 layers, and only the top 3 floors were still above the ground. The light of purification emitted by the whole Tower of Eternity suddenly dimmed so much that there were many cracks in the surrounding air. Kia appeared again while the Tower of Eternity quietly disappeared, and the next moment, Kia with the 12 sacred saints had rushed into the sky. The sickle of death flew out and soared 100 meters in the air, blatantly chopping towards Sami Gina. Sami Gina unexpectedly did not dodge in the face of the attack of this purification blade, and his devil pillar swept brazenly, as if he were going to perish together with Kia. What a madman! Kia's eyes shone with cold light. She retreated instantly in the air, and of course she didn't want to die with Sami Gina. But her sickle of death was still chopping at the opponent. Sami Gina's mental state was crazy, but his fighting instinct was still there. He picked up the back end of his devil pillar and broke the sickle of death. At the same time, at least 50 grey runes flew out at the front of the pillar and headed straight for Kia. The power of terror turned into a death storm in the air. The power of purification could purify the power of death, but when the power of death was concentrated to a certain extent, it would take some time to purify. And Sami Gina obviously wouldn't give her that time. Silhouettes quietly stood in front of Kia's body and turned into a human wall. Lines of colored light burst in the air. Kia hummed again, and her body retreated thousands of meters in the air. She spurted out a mouthful of blood. At the same time, the golden light shone on her body, and more attacks were diffused. After all, the aura of the dead couldn't really hurt her. However, of the 12 sacred saints, 6 warriors had been torn to pieces by the terrifying power of the undead, and it would take them some time to come back to life inside the Tower of Eternity. Sami Gina now gave people an invincible sense of terror. He raised his devil pillar again, but this time he let Kia go, but went straight to the southeast fortress and smashed hard. The soldiers of the southeast fortress were in a state of extreme excitement, but they also saw the changes in Sami Gina in the air. The undead in this state was really terrifying. A colorful streamer flashed across the sky and flew to Sami Gina. It was Yi Sanmi's divine bow that exuberated. Sami Gina did not dodge at all but allowed the terrifying arrow, which killed the arcane devil god Garbo in one blow, to fall on his body. The arrow landed on the armor-covered Sami Gina, which then only exploded a rift and did not hurt his body at all. Sami Gina's devil pillar still kept falling towards the southeast fortress fiercely. At this time, the strong men of the southeast fortress could no longer hide their strength, and all the eternal heroes shone with dazzling brilliance. Knowing that they could not fight against it, they had to do it still. Otherwise, once the pillar of Sami Gina fell on the southeast fortress, it would be the destruction of life. Even the city walls would be completely destroyed. Although the vicious devils were almost wiped out, there were still more than 300,000 devils out there, without the protection of the city wall, and the southeast fortress could not be preserved. Kia's figure once again appeared in front of all the strong men in the city tower, with the sickle of death shining in her hands, changing movement one after another in the air, looking like a graceful dance step, and the domain of purification was instantly recovered. As a result, her practice had been promoted to the extreme, and her strength in the domain had burst out in an all-round way. The first, the early death; the second, the purity of death; the third, the roar of death; the fourth, the kiss of death; and the fifth, the fading death. The 5 death steps came out together, then followed the 6th death steps, the path of death. This was the strongest blow in Kia's life, and the power of purification turned into a huge light blade to cut the Sami Gina's pillar of undead. Horrifying collisions burst out in the air, countless howls of grievances sounded in the air, and were instantly swallowed by the power of purification. At least half of the grey on the pillar of undead disappeared under the purification of the path of death, but the pillar itself resisted Kia's sickle of death. In the sound of the explosion, the sickle of death was raised high and Sami Gina's huge body retreated hundreds of meters. The aura of death dropped sharply. However, Kia's condition was much more miserable than he was, spurting 2 mouthfuls of blood in a row, and her entire body directly hit the wall of the southeast fortress, crushing the wall through 30 meters before she was able to stabilize her body. The remaining 6 sacred saints were all broken in order to help Kia withstand the blow. At this time, she seemed to have reached the point of exhaustion. Sami Gina was terrifying; to be exact, the devil pillar was terrifying. This was close to the existence of an imperial weapon that could completely suppress the sickle of death even when the attribute was restrained. However, now Sami Gina's state was definitely not good. At the same time, the implementation of devil's deification and the devil's disintegration method was an extreme overdraft for him. Under normal circumstances, he was unable to beat Kia, but under this kind of overdraft, she was completely suppressed, which showed how horrifying his consumption was now. After the blow was bounced back, Sami Gina's body trembled violently, and the red light in his fundus were about to collapse. However, he still raised his devil pillar again. The aura of terror had once again been raised to the extreme. Even if he were to die, he would take the officers and soldiers of the southeast fortress to be buried with him. The power of death in the second half of the Pillar of Undead extended so crazily that even Sami Gina's own armor was completely transformed into the force of death at this time. His next blow was even more terrifying than before, because it was probably his last all-out blow. In the sky, the remaining devils saw the Patriarch unexpectedly launch an attack of destruction in this way, and they all fell into a state of madness, frantically dispelling the fear in their hearts. Under the leadership of the 4 devil gods, fewer than 10,000 high-order devils frantically pounced on the southeast fortress. The vicious devils was really a vicious devil. Even if they were plotted by a deadly trap, they still had to break the southeast fortress until the very last minute. Sami Gina wanted other devils' clans to make cannon fodder for his vicious devils clan, but he never expected that the end result would turn out to be like this. The distant devil army and devil gods had no intention to come forward to help. The devil army was tired to death, and the devil gods' dissatisfaction with Sami Gina had long been on the verge of outbreak. Seeing that the vicious devils had suffered so much, they could only gloat in their hearts. They were naturally overjoyed to see Sami Gina desperately attack the southeast fortress at all costs. As long as the southeast fortress was broken, they would be the biggest beneficiaries. What did it have to do with them as to whether Sami Gina was dead or alive? Perhaps many of them would rise in the rankings because of the deaths of Sami Gina and Garbo. Kia was in sharp pain all over the body at this time, and her body was constantly flashing with golden luster, which was obviously the light of life sharing in the soul chain. If it were not for the existence of life sharing, she could not afford to withstand by now. The outburst of Undead Devil God was very horrifying, which she had never thought of before. At the same time, she was also deeply aware of her mistakes. As an assassin, she should not have competed head-on with Sami Gina, even if she thought she was in an absolute advantage. Kia struggled to leap out of the wall, while the 9 Eternal Heroes supporting the southeast fortress and the 3 Eternal Heroes and 20 warriors from the Assassin Temple were all engaged in the battle, fighting with the vicious devils. Among them, Jiu Yonghao, Yi Sanmi and 4 other Eternal Heroes hang together in mid-air, each releasing their own domains to the strongest extent, facing the Pillar of Undead that was falling from the sky. They went up with a determination to die. Sami Gina's attack at this time had reached more than level 9 of rank 8. With such a terrifying force, how could they stop it without the cost of their lives? Yi Sanmi even did not forget to turn around and smile at Kia, as if to say that the battle behind depended on you. No. Kia gave a mournful cry, and she reluctantly raised her sickle of death again. However, this time she was dying of pain all over her body, and the severe pain made it impossible for her to exert her previous strength. The only thing that must be done now was to release the Tower of Eternity again and crash into Sami Gina. However, she was one step behind Jiu Yonghao, Yi Sanmi and the other 6 people. At this time, Kia suddenly lit up a silver light, and when she felt the fluctuation of the silver light, Kia was stupefied for a moment, and then the excitement immediately calmed down and turned into unprecedented confidence. This video will end here.